G'day, gang. Today I wanted to talk about, I think, my favorite topic in terms of narrative. I wanted to talk about, I think, also the biggest piece of advice that I can ever give anyone who wants to do any sort of storytelling, um, character motivation. Right. So I think I've been thinking a lot about examples, but I just keep going back to Arcane. It's just, I think, one of the cleanest examples of character motivation that we currently have. You have all of these characters with very, very intentional motivations, and they stick to them. And they fail. They go about numerous things in numerous different ways, but they have really, really solid motivations. And not everybody has their motivation immediately clear. Just as in all stories, your characters will start and develop, especially told across lengths of time, such as, Arcane. But there's numerous different examples of that. The characters start out just being little characters growing up in a little village, and then they develop their motivations over time. But I think one of the most important things that you can do in a story, well, the most important thing you can do in a story in terms of character agency, in terms of story progression, is understand your character's motivation. It is more important than personality, appearance, sex, race, any defining characteristics about your character. The most important thing in reference to story is understanding their motivation. And if you don't understand their motivation as a storyteller, your audience is going to have no clue either. So I think knowing the motivation is the first step, and it's the most important thing you can do for your character, for all of your characters, even the side characters that aren't important to the main narrative, but that have their own narrative going on in the background. You need to understand what those characters want. It can be as simple as getting an Excel document, which I definitely had to do for my political fantasy series, and just writing down character name, character motivation, character name, character motivation, character name, character motivation. It is fun if you have as many characters as I ended up having, and you end up writing little notes about them. So you can say quirks. For an example, the air guard that I started with. So there's 4 characters who are there to protect the heir to the kingdom, and they each have motivations of protecting the heir. That is the most imperative thing. That is what they are almost bred for, because they're ants. So it is what they're bred for. But I questioning saying that because of the current opinion on that specific topic, but they're ants. So it was that they were designed for the colony to do that. It's very important to have it consistently referenced that they're ants. But they had little quirks. They each had little quirks about them that I had little notes of, such as one of them was the light-hearted, humorous one of them was the moderately competent one, and one of them was the most competent of the 3 that were under the leader, for example. Just little things about their skills, competency, or quirks, such as, one of them always does that with their hair, or one of them chews on a leaf, or, little personality quirks and details and competencies. It can help to remind yourself to also list out their sex if you forget. Definitely write down their names if you have a long list of characters, but knowing your character motivation is really essential, and then making sure that you express that in, is my character reaching their motivation? Is my character still reaching their motivation in every single scene? Get repetitious. And I think there are really bad ways to go about being repetitious about it, and definitely don't make your character say their motivations. You can make your character have conversations about your motivations and push the other characters to do their motivations. Such as if you have, in that example, you have an incompetent guard. Make another guard say, "Where's the heir? What are you doing? Where are you? Why are you here?" You know, keep them on task and keep them reminding this other character of their motivation. And then obviously this character should be going to like their higher ups and being like, "This guy, right? Why are they here?" And dobbing on them. Or if they're a fan of them, covering up for them. There, immediate story just on one motivation. Just on motivation plus a quirk or a personality trait. You just have them immediate story just from motivation. And I think if you write from motivation, you will never, ever, ever struggle with your story. You will never work out like, what are my characters supposed to be doing, because you know what they're supposed to be doing. Like, these guys are supposed to be guarding the heir. That's it. That's all they do. And they can have like hobbies, they can have preferences, they can have conflict, they can have entire lives outside of that. But the core principle of that character is always referenced through the narrative and their agency. Otherwise, you get into the classic example of character says, "I want to do X," and they go off and do Y. And then you're like, why are they doing that? They keep saying they want to find a character, but they're not looking for them. What is going on? And that is, I think, one of the critical elements of having a character of low, having a narrative of low quality, because you don't have a character that's, you have a character that's doing one thing and saying another. And people, that's normal. It is normal for people to say that they're going to do one thing and that they want to do one thing, but they say one thing, but they do another. 15 times the charm, am I right? But but having them constantly fail and not have them checked on that is really problematic. So you do have to remember what your characters want, and you do have to remember what other characters around them want. But that gets very fun, because if you have two motivations that are completely opposed, like you have a spy in the guards, one of them wants to kill the heir, the other one wants to protect the heir. You have an immediate critical conflict where these characters, that they are always going to butt heads. And then you have the middle in between of, I want to be a good guard, but I don't like the heir. So this character will side with both of the characters at one point in time. So you have these interweaving storylines that create conflict and then have resolution, and then a little bit of conflict and then resolution, and then you can have a massive confrontation. Characters can potentially die, have other significant consequences and such, just because these characters have different motivations. And it is that simple to form the basis of a story, to write basically anything. This is true especially for political stories, and by political I mean governmental. I don't mean I talked about politics in entertainment and the way in which that particularly English-speaking cultures define politics, but I'm talking about politics in the actual definition, such as governmental. So like A Song of Ice and Fire, for example, Arcane, for example, where they are specifically talking about the policies in which that they are governed, and they are specifically trying to rebel or defend those specific policies. You know, it's very different from the usage of the term politics in terms of conversation. Political writing, Warring Kingdoms, for example, is political, and then having those characters stick to their motivations in that genre is very, very important. And revealing motivations can be really significant in that genre too. For example, you have one character that all throughout the narrative has been saying, we need to kill this king, and then finally the king comes to them and offers them a deal, and their actual motivation is revealed, whereby they wanted to be a leader of a specific area, like they wanted to be the duke all along. You can definitely do that, but you have to make it sure that this character is always keeping their motivation, because it is the most solid way to present characters with conviction and boundaries. And there are definitely times in which that you can stray from your motivation, but when you do it, be intentional. Make sure that what you do strengthens the narrative, it doesn't weaken it. Classic example of one of the more recent Star Wars movies. You know, I'm looking for Rey, and never actually looks for Rey, instead goes off on a side adventure. It feels weird. You know, give this character justification and motivation for why they are deviating from their path, and make it clear. Or you risk making the narrative feel very strange and incohesive. You risk making your character seem like they inconsistent characters are very tricky in terms of motivation in a story. You make them seem like jerks. And if you want to have a jerk, that's fantastic. But if the intention is to make this character a hero, and they're saying all along, I want to slay the dragon for 10 hours straight, and then they walk off and chase a rabbit, it doesn't make much sense. Then you kind of have to explain, you know, they were actually trying to protect the rabbit all along, or something absurd like that. But you have to solidify it. You have to understand what your character wants from the start. And if you wanted to do something like that with a surprise ending motivation, give them signs of it. So, for example, you know, in the character that ends up siding with the king, give them little examples of all along that, well, if I was in, you know, if I had my own territory, this is what I would do. You know, have them constantly spreading that narrative to make their motivations clear. So then, while that might be a surprise twist, it has been foreshadowed and solidified because you, as the storyteller, had the understanding of where you wanted that character to go. So that's the most important thing about motivation, is knowing where you want your characters to end up. And I think that is the leading thing of the best advice that I can give, is right from motivation, right from the end of the story. Always know where your characters are going to end up, unless they die along the way, which is kind of fun anyway. But that's my best piece of advice for any storytelling, character-based storytelling. Right from motivation, stick to it. Don't deviate from it. And yeah, I'd like really good examples of characters that successfully deviated from their motivations and why. And for example, having a character betray their own group, really fantastic narrative, and make it have a dynamite event as to why they did that, a really explosive conflict that completely changed their mind. Really great storytelling, because ultimately their motivations are clear on both sides of the divide. Tell me examples of characters that had weak motivations, strong motivations, anything. I want to hear from you all. I'm particularly interested in this one because this one is, I think, my greatest piece of storytelling advice is keep your motivations. Yeah, tell me what you think. Okay, bye.